Welcome to Emotions and Eating with Nicola-beer. Nicola controlled her feelings using food for 25 years, so she knows how draining it is to be constantly thinking about or acting out with food. Thankfully, having made an amazing breakthrough in her recovery, her mission became about helping others escape the unsatisfying cycle of frustration and self-medication with food. Nicola is determined to help you find your inner strength so you can be healthy, gain confidence, feel great, and be at peace with yourself and food.
Hi and welcome, this is Nicola-beer, and it's a real honour to have you with me today because I'm going to be sharing today about signs of eating disorders. What are the signs? What are the types of eating disorders? Did you know that in the US alone, an estimated 20 million women and 10 million men have or have had an eating disorder at some point in their lives? A lot of people, right? And you may be wondering, what are the eating disorder signs? Whilst I dislike the word disorder, I will start with a description of common eating disorders and then share how to know if you may have an eating disorder. It's for you to decide for yourself only if you have an issue with eating and no one else. The most well-known one is Anorexia Nervosa, a disorder where the sufferer starves themselves because of the desire to either maintain an unrealistic and unhealthy body image, or because of emotional reasons they don't want to eat and want to punish themselves or to disappear altogether. Anorexics tend to label food as good and bad. They isolate to avoid eating and suffer a huge amount of anxiety when going to social events where they may have to eat food that they don't want to. Among the lesser known and less studied eating disorders, behaviours, is often linked with anorexia, and that is chewing and spitting. This activity consists of chewing food and usually following that they spit it out. The food is highly enjoyable and energy dense, and they spit it out before swallowing. The reason the person with this eating disorder does this is to enjoy the food's taste whilst preventing the ingestion of calories. Chewing and spitting has some similarities to bulimia and binge eating because it can involve consuming a large amount of high-calorie foods in a short period of time. But it's also similar to anorexia and restrictive eating in that the food is not ingested. I actually learnt about chewing and spitting in the film To the Bone, which is a 2017 film, and it talks about the character is going through anorexia and she's in a rehab centre, and then one of the girls in this centre goes out for a meal and literally spends a whole meal chewing the food and spitting it back out, and I was really shocked. Then there is bulimia-nervosa, and this is a disorder that triggers the sufferer to consume large amounts of food, binge, and then to rid themselves of as much fat and calories by purging the food through vomiting. However, it's not always after a large binge. Some bulimics will purge just after a small amount of food because they want to get rid of the food and to avoid gaining weight. Often they feel disgust or guilt after eating, and this triggers the bulimic episode. Then there are other purging disorders beside bulimia and the bulimic pattern of being sick. Other purging behaviours such as using laxatives, diuretics, or excessive exercising to control weight or shape. Then there is binge eating disorder, a disorder where the sufferer compulsively eats often thousands of calories within a 2-hour period. The eater will eat frequently in secret and may hide food around their house or in their bag. Binge eating disorders are becoming increasingly common and have similar symptoms to those with bulimia or binge eating subtype of anorexia, as they will usually feel a huge lack of control during binges. That is the craving, the urge to stuff, to feel full, to make themselves full is so strong. Compulsive eating disorder is where a person eats and grazes all day on food. Basically, once they start, they cannot stop thinking of the next food to eat, and then the next, and then the next. They may be able to say that they are not going to eat in the morning and get through the morning not eating, or even all the way through the morning an afternoon not eating. But once they begin to eat, they literally snack the rest of the day and often plan what they will eat next like a never-ending cycle until they go to bed. Avoidant restrictive food take disorder is another disorder whereby individuals experience disturbed eating due to a lack of interest in eating or a distaste for certain smells, tastes, colours, textures or temperatures. Another type of eating disorder experienced by people is night eating syndrome. Now, I was actually surprised to find this as an eating disorder, but actually, according to the Eating Disorder Association, it is. And it includes individuals who frequently eat excessively at night, often waking up and going to get something to eat in the middle of the night. Then there is orthorexia. Orthorexia is a term for a condition that includes symptoms of obsessive behaviour in a pursuit of a healthy diet. Many people living with this orthorexia condition may report that it started off as a positive way to improve their health, yet they become so rigid in it that it has the opposite effect. It damages their health. Cutting out so many foods limits their diet and health, and they suffer immensely. People with orthorexia often also display signs and symptoms of anxiety disorders that frequently co-occur with anorexia nervosa and other eating disorders. That is, they get anxious about eating their meals or being around food that they label as bad. Just like an anorexic or bulimic, they have set rules around their eating. They become so rigid that they isolate themselves, or when they do eat outside of their rules, they become overwhelmed with guilt. Another less known eating disorder is pica. This is another entirely new condition, only recognised as an eating disorder recently. Individuals with pica crave non-food substances such as ice, dirt, soil, chalk, soap, paper, hair, cloth, wool, pebbles, laundry detergent or cornstarch. Lastly, there are eating disorders not otherwise specified. ENDOS is the actual term. It's actually called eating disorder not otherwise specified, and this includes any other eating disorders that don't fit into those categories that I have just mentioned. In all honesty, this was similar to what I was diagnosed with once, and it was very frustrating to be told that I have an undiagnosed eating disorder. I used to be a combination of the above, and in fact over 20 years I've had different eating disorders. I started as a binger and then later discovered bulimia as a way to keep thin, and then started late night eating and compulsive eating until I reached 19, when I flipped to eating carrots, vegetable soups and apples and focused on staying under a healthy weight, way under a healthy weight in fact. I used to eat literally nothing. I wouldn't eat any carbohydrates, any meat, any dairy, anything. It was literally carrots and apples and vegetable soup. I tried to break away from this. I knew that this was not healthy, and when I tried to break away from this, I developed bulimia, because as soon as I ate what I considered to be too much but may have been a normal meal, I would then be sick, and then I would starve myself again. In an attempt to stop the bulimia, I then developed orthorexia, where I'd literally planned everything again, not to the extreme of the anorexia days, but definitely my orthorexia stopped me from socialising and eating things out. I would need special meals prepared. I wouldn't eat any dairy, any fish, any meat, any carbohydrates, any desserts, any nuts, any fruit even. Then I repeated these in cycle. Looking back and now seeing it objectively, I can see how I went from one eating disorder to another. I hope that the other way of eating would protect me, but I never really had any peace or freedom from it all. I was still thinking about food all the time, and it was still a worry for me. Thankfully, I had an amazing breakthrough, and from this breakthrough I've created a proven step-by-step system to help people free themselves from eating disorders, including changing the eating patterns, reducing anxiety, guilt around eating, letting that go, dealing with the emotional triggers that lay beneath eating disorders, and strategies to overcome the urges and compulsions to eat or avoid food. My mission is to help others to become free so they can experience inner calm, have peace with food and their bodies. Here are some signs that you may have an eating disorder. As I share this with you, just think, is this true for you? You may even want to have a notepad and pen and just write a little tick if one applies to you, and then total up your score at the end. Because eating disorders are not only about the size of a person, they're about how you view yourself, how you treat yourself, how you feel before and after eating. Many people I have worked with look great on the outside, yet on the inside they're consumed with guilt, anxiety and stress around food. They feel bad about their eating habits, and this affects their self-esteem and overall enjoyment of life. Here are some of the most common signs and behaviours associated with eating disorders. As I mentioned, just see if any resonate with you. You have lost a lot of weight in a short period of time, or you have gained a lot of weight in a short period of time. You eat large quantities of food in less than 2 hours. You vomit after eating. You secretly binge on food. You have rigid and restrictive rules around your food and you are not willing to change. You take laxatives, diuretics or diet pills. You hoard large amounts of food, fear of not having enough. You exercise compulsively and intensively more than 6 times a week. You hide your food for later. You have anxiety over food before eating and during mealtimes with others. You feel guilty after eating. You use prescription stimulant medications and or stimulant drugs to suppress your appetite. You eat until you cannot move. You use food as comfort or reward. You isolate yourself, so you eat alone. You perform the same eating ritual repeatedly. You have low self-esteem when it comes to your body and your eating habits. You lie about the food you eat. You have stolen food. You feel unhappy with your weight and your body. Your mood is dependent on the amount of food eaten that day. You repeatedly weigh yourself and track your progress. You repeatedly label yourself as fat or unattractive. You have withdrawn from families and friends, particularly following questions about your eating or size. You avoid meals or situations where food may be present. You have a preoccupation with weight, body size, shape, or other aspects of your appearance. You obsess over your calorie intake and calories burned via exercise, counting, analysing and tracking food and weight. You spoil food, like pour water over it, just to make sure that you won't eat it. Can you identify with 2 or more of these? If yes, you do not need to label yourself with an eating disorder. The only thing to ask yourself is, do you want change? I remember when people used to say to me, Nicola, is everything okay with your eating? And I'd say exactly what they wanted to hear. I'd admit I had a problem, and then I would say that I'm trying to deal with it on my own way. But really, I was either not ready to change my eating habits most of the time, or didn't actually know how to stop the anxiety and guilt around food. They would come up with certain type of foods or an eating plan for me, or they would just say some things to me like, exercise less, Nicola, eat more carbs, try not to be sick, you just need to put a little bit more fat on you. Do you like cheese? Have a bit more cheese and dairy. You need to eat more meat and protein, or just don't lose any more weight. Then that was the conversation over. I've had over 500 conversations like this over the 20 plus years I've suffered from my eating disorders, maybe much more than that. And whilst I appreciated their love and concerns, it didn't help me, because I needed a solution, a plan of action, a number or an email of a coach or of someone that could tell me what to do. Even on the times where I said to myself, okay, I need to put on weight, I found it really difficult to do. I would binge and then be sick. I couldn't find a way to put on weight healthily. It was either starving or binging. I'm not sure if you can relate to that. If you can, And if you're ready to step into action, then you do use the link along with this recording so